Hi, Anna. Thanks so much for joining the podcast.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
The first question I wanted to ask you, because I follow you on Instagram, is how did your early Thanksgiving go? And I am also American living in Canada. So I'm adjacent, I'm nearby, but I was just kind of wondering how that experience was and how did your guests receive what you made?
It was truly so beautiful. I had never hosted Thanksgiving before or cooked that whole meal on my own. And it to do it for the first time here in Paris in my apartment was really beautiful. It like at one point I started kind of crying right away because I put on like the music my dad would play when he would start cooking Thanksgiving dinner, and then just instantly those smells happen. And when it's these same recipes, you're hit with these smells that like I don't get here often because we
Right.
don't cook those things. And I became very nostalgic, and I was like tearing up of like, I can't believe I'm a grown up doing this in my Paris kitchen of this like apartment and place I always wanted to live in. And I'm doing this for my French boyfriend's family. So it was very beautiful, like the whole process of cooking. And then sharing that meal with people who didn't grow up eating it and thought it was, bizarre and fun. Was also a really fun chance to share a bit of who I am and what my culture is, because you don't do that often when you're living in another country. It's a lot of learning. You're the one who's displaced yourself and you're the visitor. And so you're doing the learning and you're doing the question asking and the trying to understand and adapting. So it was really fun to sort of, for an afternoon, explain a bit about my culture and share those recipes and traditions.
Was there something they loved or didn't like that was like an unusual taste for them?
Didn't like pumpkin pie.
What?
The French don't like, I mean, you hate to generalize. Many French people I know do not like cinnamon. It's not a part of their cuisine at all.
Okay.
And it just is like it's a taste that they don't enjoy. And then the same with pumpkin. They don't cook pumpkin really. They have pumpkin soup in the fall, but it's not very popular. So the concept of like eating that as a dessert did not go over well. I knew it would be a long shot, but I felt like I had to make them a pumpkin pie. I was like, I served it saying, you do not have to like this. You don't have to pretend you like this. If you hate this, I understand. But I wanted to make it for you because I think it's the only chance you will ever have to try this. And so, tell me what you think. But it was funny.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, you're a travel influencer, among other things, and I wanted to know where your deep desire from travel comes from and what perspective you feel that the extensive travel that you do has given you.
I tried to answer this question in my book when I was writing my memoir. I was trying to define where did it come from, because we didn't travel a lot as kids in my family. There were seven of us. We couldn't afford to travel, and I didn't know. I didn't really have an education in different places. So I truly just have to believe that it was innate. Um, and I trace it back to books. I traced it to loving my visits to the library as a little kid and checking out all these books. And I read like, religiously all through my life. And those were my first kind of like adventures and escapes. And I remember reading, the Chronicles of Narnia and being like, what is Turkish delight? I want to try that. I want to walk through a wardrobe. And I would read these books called but that, like, it was the life of Georgia Nicholson. They were like her diaries, and she lived in England, and then she went to Scotland and New Zealand, and like that's how I learned about those places, and that made me want to go to those places. So I really think it was that. It was these, like, I transported myself through books first, and then it made me want to go have that experience.
Okay, so let's talk about the memoir. I was wondering, just a little backstory. What happened was I had mentioned this to you when I reached out that my marriage is ending unexpectedly, and a dear friend brought your book by, and I really didn't want to read it because it was given to me within the first week, and I followed you on Instagram because you're fun and kind of aspirational for me, and you're beautiful and all this stuff. And I was like, I do not want to read her book. And you're also a lot younger. And then all of a sudden, it just, it really helped me a lot. And I was just kind of wondering, why do you think this book is reaching people that, I mean, I just didn't think I could relate to you. I want to maybe be like you, but I can't relate. And I found it very relatable.
That truly makes me so happy. That's the best review and compliment anyone could ever give the project I spent 4 years working on, because that was completely my intent. I wrote it to help people feel seen and to relate to the situation that I went through, because I knew, regardless of how different our lives are as people, as women, regardless of age and location and all the other factors, we we deal with this loss of self almost universally. And
Mhm.
whether it's from a relationship, as it often is, and that could be a romantic relationship, or a friend, a family member. It can be you can lose yourself in your job. People have told me they lost themselves temporarily in motherhood. There are so many things that you get involved with because you love, the intent is good, but then you end up really kind of losing sight of yourself because you are, in the name of love and goodness, you just keep giving and giving and giving of your time and your needs and your own, desires and dreams, because you're making something happen for someone or something else. And I really felt like we don't talk about that enough. And when I started going through my divorce, I really felt very alone because I didn't really have anyone to relate to. Most of my friends, I got divorced at 30. Most of my friends in New York weren't even engaged yet. No one had been through a divorce aside from my sister. And even then it was a very different situation. So she could help me in many ways, but also, not in others. And I went to a bookstore trying to find a book to make me feel better, because as I said, like, books were just always my outlet for inspiration and help and everything. And I was going through the bookstore that day and couldn't find anything that I liked, and I kind of just said, I want to write a book that I would want to pick up right now, that is just someone I could relate to, where it works out better in the end, because I really did believe it would work out better. I knew it was the right thing and I knew I would get there, but I just needed to feel like I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the only person in the world having these thoughts. I wasn't the only person in the world who was lost. And and so that's just sort of what I wrote. And I think the true, like, the reason people connect to that is because it is this very universal thing, that you may not have someone in your immediate group of family or friends that you're comfortable talking about something so deeply complex and painful about, but to be able to relate to someone on paper is almost just as powerful.
I I agree with all of that. Now, okay, I have a lot of questions. So the first question I wanted to ask you is about your relationship to change. And when I look back as my marriage was unraveling this year, I realized now one of the main reasons I didn't want it to end is I didn't want anything to change. And I don't really like change. And I just couldn't envision being alone or being without my husband. It was just, I just wanted it all to be the same. And I wanted to know, I mean, you made a big move after your divorce, but what is your relationship to change and post divorce? Or like, how do you, I can feel that I mean, I'm just at the beginning of this journey, but I have a feeling I'm going to be more, well, I don't have a choice. I have to change. So I just wanted to know how you relate to that right now.
I think that I felt exactly that same way. And was, I wasn't the one who ended my marriage. My ex-husband was, but I wasn't happy, but I was too afraid to end it for that same reason. I was like, what would the next chapter look like? All I know is this person. And even though I'm not actually I felt like that's like your comfort zone, right? Like we don't want change because we think we're in the comfort zone. But you have to stop and ask, like, is this comfort zone actually comfortable? Like, am I happy here? Is this working? And if the answer is no, which a lot of the time it is, then in my head, you really only stand to gain. Because if things are not good, if you change it up, you have the ability to fix what's wrong, to make it better, to rethink it. And you, in going through that moment of rebuilding, everything becomes really intentional. And I realized that as I was in this, kind of like at ground zero of my divorce and was going into, okay, everything has to change. But I realized, I've done this before. I have, when we all have, we've all left our parents' home to go to college. We've all left that dorm and this, to move here. We've all moved to a city for a new job. We've all had it on these small levels. So when you look back, you have to give yourself credit for what you have already done and realize there have already been a lot of times in my life where a big change has happened. And more often than not, it has probably resulted in good and new friends, new hobbies, new experiences, new developments, new jobs. Like usually you grow when you change. And so I really went back, I took all that inventory, and then I looked at it as this opportunity to have a reality that I was truly comfortable and happy with, instead of living in this place of like, I don't want anything to change. I'm just going to stay here, even though I'm not happy with it. And when you start rebuilding, you really do get to say like, okay, what am I going to, even just waking up on my own for the first time, I was like, okay, I used to wake up and have to like be silent because I'm an early riser and my ex-husband wasn't. So I'd be like tiptoeing around our apartment and not turning any lights on. And,
I'm the same. That's the same with me.
Clothes out of the closet to go to the gym and just hoping I didn't wake him up because I didn't want to feel bad. So then I wake up on my own and I'm like, how do I want my day to start? Do I want to wake up early? Do I want to sleep in? Like everything got a reset. And then like absolutely everything, because so much of my life I was living for someone else and around their needs or rules or restrictions. And so everything became so intentional. And that's when I decided to move to France. I was like, do I even want to live in New York anymore? Or am I just living here because I've been living here? And so I was like, I'm doing what I want to do. I'm moving to France. And I realized I'm waking up and I'm blasting music and I'm dancing. I don't have to tiptoe around in the dark anymore. I get to spend my morning how I want to spend my morning. I'm buying a coffee machine because I wasn't allowed to have one before. I'm buying a coffee machine and I'm going to spend my mornings drinking coffee and dancing with the music blasting. And like the smallest thing like that makes the hugest positive change. To very quickly, you start to look back and go, I don't know how I used to live like that. I don't know how I let myself live in that place for so long. And I would have kept living like that and never discovered the joy waiting on the other side of this growth.
Okay. So this is kind of adds on to that question, but you talk about, you have a quote that I read about how a lot of people think of divorce as failure, and then you don't see it like that. And that, I mean, I guess that you've just sort of answered that you see it as a new beginning, I guess. So,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. What about the power of saying yes post-divorce? You've talked about that as well. You said you went through a phase where you just kind of said yes to everything. And tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that a lot of that was just part of that, of what I was saying, of this like intentional rebuilding of my life. I didn't want to just fall into the old habits of what I would do and wouldn't do just because it was what I was used to. And when I moved here specifically, I was like, okay, I don't know anyone. I don't know what it's like to really live here. And so saying yes sort of just became my rule of like, I'm going to say yes to anything that is offered to me, within reason, of course. But, any invitation I get to go somewhere, I'm just going to say yes. I'm not going to be the, will it be too loud? Will I not know anybody? I don't even, I don't like that kind of food. I don't want it. I just was like, no, yes, no more excuses. I'm saying yes. And any like work opportunity that came my way. Yes. Okay. Even if it wasn't enough money, even if it was too much time, even if an opportunity came, yes. And I did that basically to just kind of bring about more and more of that change and not be too stuck in my old ways, to embrace new things and try new things. And I too, like, I used to have to say no to so much in my old life, because again, I was putting someone else first. And it you often have to do that when someone else is involved in the picture. You can't just say yes. You kind of have to make sure it works with their life too. And so much had been no for so long, that then it just became, my goal of just, I'm saying yes to everything, because I can. I don't have anyone that I have to run things by anymore, or anybody who's going to tell me no for whatever reason. So the answer is yes.
Even would you go out even when you didn't feel like it? Because there's obviously times during this period you're just not feeling great. You sort of made a commitment, just say, I'm going to get up anyway and go.
Well, I mean, I really put this into play once after about a couple, like, this idea actually hit me on my wedding anniversary. So my divorce started in June, and my wedding anniversary was the end of August. And that day I was thinking about, my wedding, and that I had had this wedding, and I was very much like, I don't think I ever will want to get married again. And I felt like I had, like, wasted my wedding. I had this like period of time where I was like, it's so sad that, like, I won't do that again. And like, I won't have that like proposal moment again. Like I wasted that. Yes. Like that one special. Yes. This thought entered my head, and I very quickly dismissed it. Like, I very quickly was like, that's not right. Like, that's not right at all. There will be so many other exciting yeses. And so I think, that initial moment of like, I had a full 2 or 3 months where I really didn't want to go anywhere or see anyone. And I had a lot of embarrassment and shame. And this kind of hit after that. So I was already kind of feeling better and very much like excited about this new chapter of my life when I instituted this, like, we're saying yes. I always feel like you have to guard, like, if you really know, like, I'm unwell and I shouldn't be out tonight, then no, don't, then the
Yeah.
answer is no. But it was me being like, I have to say yes to times that I might just want to say no, because my comfort zone is like, I don't want to do that.
Okay. Okay. I have a question about Amanda and Nick. And for those people who don't know who they are, or maybe they don't understand the connection, could you tell everybody? And specifically, I wanted you to address the quote that when Nick said to you, Annie, best day ever. Could you explain that?
Yeah, Amanda is my older sister, who's closest in age to me, and Nick is my late brother-in-law, who uh Amanda, Nick, and I all lived in New York at the same time, and along with my other sister Allie, and we used to hang out all the time as a little trio, because we both worked these unusual hour jobs. So we got very close, and I would be at their apartment all the time, and it was a really beautiful thing, because someone who is your immediate family is, my immediate family in the wake of my divorce was just so worried and just, sad, and they're feeling what you're feeling, and they're also crying because you're crying. But then someone who really knows you and loves you, but is like that, just, it's a brother-in-law, or it's there's something that, like, they haven't been with you your whole life. um Nick just saw my strength and power and capability and talent when I couldn't. And the night that my husband actually left, I went up to their apartment and stayed at their apartment, and I was just crying all day. I, just couldn't do anything. And I just felt like my life was over. And Nick just had the biggest smile on his face at the end of the day and gave me a huge hug. And he said, Annie, best day ever. And I looked at him like, huh? I thought I was like making a funny joke. And he was just he said, no, this is going to be the best day of your life. This person was holding you back. You get to live your own life now. I can't wait to see what you do with it. And it was just the absolute best thing anyone could have possibly said to me. And the best thing that I think you could kind of ever say to somebody at that point, because our gut says to just like empathize and to match their level, right? So like if someone's down, you should be down, and it's going to be okay, this is awful, I'm sorry. But someone just reminding you that like they see the you that maybe you're not able to see in that moment, and they know you're going to be just fine. In fact, you're going to be so great, that it just was like it it stuck with me. I mean, I've almost gotten it to I joked with him for a while that I was going to get a tattooed on my body, because it truly, when I looked back, like that was the day that I got my life back. That was the day that I took control of things back. It did turn out to be the best day ever, because it was the day I got to start over. And it just was, I mean, he always had such perfect things to say. But it was such a beautiful moment. And my brother-in-law passed away in July of 2020. And it's truly just something that has really stuck with me, of him helping me through the absolute worst day of my life and convincing me that it was actually the best one.
Um, okay, I have a question. In the book, you talk about how divorce tempts you to look back and see all the bad things, but it you talk about how you not to discount the good times. Is that something you were able to do right away, or how did you get there?
No, I kind of was able to do that right away. I will say, and I think this is the same with any kind of grief or loss or pain, your feelings about it change every day. And that initial, however long it takes, a year or a couple of months, like your feelings might change every single day. But I did initially sort of feel like I'm really upset that this has ended up this way. This was not what I wanted or hoped for. And even the way it happened was not, you know, what I would have hoped for. If I had to end up divorced, I would have loved for that to be a mutual decision that we both reach in a loving way, not what happened. Um, but I was able to sort of say, I can't discredit all the things that this person has shown me, uh, taught me, the wonderful experiences we've had together. Those things still last. And I think by just by not recognizing them, you're only kind of setting yourself up to hurt more. Like I never wanted to look back on that 10 years of my life as like, well, that was a total waste. Like, of course it wasn't. I fell in love with someone. I had a beautiful, beautiful years of traveling together and experiences. And there were certainly hard times and hardships throughout all of that. But there was a lot of good as well. Nothing is ever so completely black and white, and you have to look at those shades of gray. And for me, it really helped me. It truly like helped me heal and move on, to really focus on those good things and say there's some really beautiful takeaways from this marriage that I will always cherish and be very thankful for.
Another question I had for you, and I'm new in this process, but I've decided that I think there's a moment where your marriage is over before you're willing to acknowledge it. And throughout the book, you talk a lot. You were quite young, but you talk about not trusting your gut. And now looking back, is there a moment when it could be at any time, even before you got married, but did you know it was maybe wrong or that you needed to get out, but you weren't ready to face that? Like, when did you, yeah. question about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's there's a essay in my book called Hoodwinked. It's about halfway through. And that essay I started writing that day in I think that was 2018 or 17.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was it hit me in that moment that my marriage wasn't going to work. I knew it wasn't going to work, and I knew that fighting for it to work was probably the wrong thing to do. And that's why that image is on my book cover, because I identified that as the moment that I first accepted that I needed more, and that you know, there was a shift in my head that day. And in retrospect, though, I've said many times when my marriage, because that was right. I mean, if you're listening, you haven't read the book. My husband tried to end our marriage about a year and a half before it actually ended. And it was a very, for me, traumatic experience. And I just wasn't, it came out of nowhere, and I just wasn't willing to accept it. And so I fought really, really hard to kind of make him stay and keep trying. And I was just, I said, I'm willing to do anything to make this work. And so we kept trying and went to therapy together and had another, year and a half or so before it really ended. So when it ended, then I looked back at that of being like, I should have just let this end a year and a half ago. But actually, I wasn't ready to.
You also would have questioned that, I think, because you would have
Exactly.
been, you don't want to leave and not have tried, because then
Exactly.
you don't
And
want
I
to
didn't feel
out
like
of
I had.
ego and all that.
So for me, even though I kind of I first accepted and knew, I think this is not going to work at that point, and still remained married for another, year-ish, I had to know that I gave it absolutely everything. And I think the piece I walked away with when it did end was that knowledge, was like, I have tried everything. I have sacrificed everything I possibly can. Nothing works. Nothing I can do is going to fix this. And I think that's why I very quickly was able to kind of accept it, because I really felt like I gave it absolutely everything in every way that I could.
Um, so as you were discovering the new you or post divorce I know I'm doing this right now. You make little steps, like whether it's opening my own bank account or all that kind of thing. What do you, looking back, what was sort of that most significant step that you took, or something that you thought was where something really shifted for the first time, that I'm
Oh,
going to be okay?
when I decided to move to France, um, I it was funny. That idea should have hit me right away, but it didn't, because I was still just so like afraid of the change initially, and I just wanted to be as comfortable as I could. So I started looking at an apartment in New York to be near to my mom and dad. My mom was actually looking in her building that her
Oh
and my
God.
sister lived in,
Oh
so
no.
that I could just like rent the place upstairs. And I was like, yeah, maybe that's a good idea. And I just started like basically trying to just like adapt my life into this new situation as easily as I could. And and then when I left later that summer for a trip, which was started with work, but then ended up kind of being like my own like eat, pray, love summer. When I got to Paris, I was just so happy. I was so happy, and I was just having the best day and the best time. And I was like, why am I not moving here? This was always my dream. This is where I wanted to live. And when I kind of just stood up and said to no one but me, I'm moving here, I'm moving to Paris, I suddenly got so excited. Like it was such a big, and it felt like the first really big thing that I was choosing, that I knew I wanted, and I knew wouldn't have been possible in this old life. And it just felt really, really empowering to be like, this is what I'm going to do. And that was kind of like the start of all the excitement.
Yeah, and you're not comparing to like one thing I can compare, both my kids have left home, and when the last one left, I started to do some new things, including this podcast, because then it's like it's not like an empty seat at the table. It's like a new experience. So I don't. Okay.
Yeah, well, and it was always my dream. And I think sometimes, we have these crazy dreams and then it's so easy to just part with them because they're crazy or hard or complicated. But that really felt like if I don't go for this now, like I kind of had nothing to lose in my head. I had already lost everything. Like
Yeah.
husband gone, apartment gone, job gone, everything gone. And so I was like, if I have to start over completely, now is the time to just go after the wild dream, because I can always come back to what I already know if it doesn't work out. But it felt like the opportune time to just take a crazy chance.
So in your acknowledgments, you thank your ex for the things that he taught you or that you had together. And then you also think you were a magician's assistant. You talk about how magic helped you. Can you, your book is called My Own Magic. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, because of the magic community, I saw the whole world. Um, and even though I did find a lot of the a lot of existing within that world very challenging, which I talk about in my book, because you're in this like niche world where you're not, it's not your interest, it's not your passion, and you're a bit of I became a bit invisible, because that's just, I think, what can happen when you're completely immersed in someone else's existence and you have no ties to your own. um but because of all the various places that my husband's job took us and the different opportunities it brought, like I had so many incredible experiences, and I did meet some very wonderful people, and had a lot of fun and funny moments and lessons learned. So there was no way to me to finish, you write the acknowledgments last, or at least I did, like truly the last thing I wrote. And when it came time to write all of that, I was like, there's no way I couldn't thank, both my husband and the magic community for helping me to grow into who I am, to see the world, to have this, you know, kind of rebirth at this age and go after everything I wanted. Everything, you get to where you are because of everything you've been through. And ultimately, when I ended up here living the life I always wanted to live and doing the thing I always wanted to do, I kind of feel like I have no choice but to look back at everything that got me here with gratitude. Because even if they were hard lessons learned, like it brought me here, it brought me to where I ultimately wanted to be.
Um, so you have a boyfriend and you're in love, and I wanted to know, he's very cute. You guys are so cute. Um, what? Okay, I already can see how you could bring baggage forward with you, but what are the positive lessons from, like, must know what you want or expectations? Like,
Oh,
how are you showing up in this current relationship that you couldn't have shown up for if you hadn't been through your divorce?
I think the thing is you show up for you. You show up for yourself. The first time, at least me, and I think this can apply to many people, I just was so enamored with my ex-husband when I met him. I thought he was amazing. I not only put him on a pedestal, I built it, and just I just wanted to be the person that he wanted to be with and that he needed. And so I just kept changing and sacrificing and shifting and trying to make him happy. And that is how I completely lost sight of my own needs, wants, dreams, desires. When I went into a relationship this time, I was so aware of what I had to guard with all of my might and never compromise away. Because when I trade away those things, I lose me. And I can't be half of a healthy relationship if I'm not me. And if I'm not healthy and if I'm not feeling good. So I every relationship requires compromise. There's zero scenario in which you're never going to have to compromise anything to be with someone else and to make it work. But I learned what parts of me are not on the table. Like what parts, if someone needs that to change to be with me, then I have to be out, because if I trade away that, I lose who I am. And I also became very aware of like, what parts of me should someone not need? Like if they need this to change, then that's a red flag. Then I should run, because that's a part of me I love, or that's again a part of me that makes me me, that is a defining me character. And if they don't like that particular thing, then this isn't going to work, because I shouldn't have to change that part of me in order to gain someone else's love. And I think that lesson can honestly only be learned after going through a bad breakup or divorce, because once you're on your own again and you have to take care of you, that's like it's a lot of healing to do, and it is a hard road for a lot of people to pave back to who they are. But once you get that person back and you've become this actually like 2.0 version of yourself, because now you're stronger and you're smarter and you're just like much more aware of what can happen to you if you don't protect these things. That I just went into this relationship so 100% me, and so certain that I had to always take care of myself in order to be a good part of this relationship.
How do you do all those things and remain open-hearted? Like kind of like open to being vulnerable, like because you have to balance that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't think it is. I've always been very open hearted, so I don't necessarily feel like for me that was a particular
That wasn't a
struggle.
challenge. That wasn't a challenge.
Yeah, it wasn't a challenge. I think what is just hard is setting, though it's boundaries essentially, right? It's
Hmm.
like you setting the boundary, and it's just as difficult to it was just as difficult for me to do with family. It can be difficult to do with friends, because you love these people, but when you set a boundary, like the people you love they shouldn't be threatened by that. Like a boundary isn't going to threaten
Hmm.
a relationship that is at its core good and pure and someone who truly cares about you. The only people who are going to be threatened and mad about boundaries are the ones who were benefiting from the lack of them. And so I didn't really find it a struggle, because I went in, I mean, I was dating some other people that, yeah, maybe it wasn't working, and I was just very quickly like, okay. But when I met my boyfriend, like I never felt any sort of pushback on any of these things of that I was very clearly like, no, for me it's this, or it has to be this. Um and I always also encourage the person, my boyfriend, to have those as well. Like you have to have those healthy boundaries. You have to protect who you are in order to really show up in a relationship.
What language do you guys speak when you're together, by the way? I was just curious. Do you speak
Oh, we
French or?
speak such a mix of language. It's funny. It's I know other couples who do the same thing. Apparently, they say, where like I might switch halfway through a sentence. It's very bizarre, but like I'd say we have spoken more English over the last couple of years, because when I met my boyfriend, he didn't speak English. So I
Oh,
really like okay, we have to teach you. After about 6 months, I was like, I think we need to work on your English because I want you to be able to know my family. And, I was like, they don't know a word of French. You're never going to get to like talk to my dad. And he really wanted to learn English as well. So for a while we were speaking primarily English. But we speak truly like such a funny mix of, you know,
Franglais.
such a funny mix of Franglais, and it could change on a whim.
Well, those are all my questions, and I just really am grateful for the time you spent. And um, actually, I just got a lot of I have a lot of new tips to start my new life with. So,
But I really appreciate your questions, and I'm just so thankful that my experience is helpful to you and relatable, and it means a lot to me that to hear that, because like I said at the beginning, that is why I wrote this book.
thank you and good luck. Well, your book. So you're traveling now. Did you say part of it is a book tour? You'll do a few book events, or
I am doing a book event in London this coming Tuesday, and then I am doing a book event in Fort Lauderdale on November 28th.
okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a lovely weekend. What, Thursday?
It's Thursday.
Okay.
Close.
Almost.
Okay, thank
Have a
you.
lovely Thursday.
Okay, bye.
Bye.